997 WTN. Senator, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Dan, how are you this morning?
Two thumbs up in my world. Now, let's talk a little bit about the economy. I know that, and I was just talking to folks there before you came on, but, you know, one of the things that is so frustrating to me is that there are so many provable lies there within the Biden administration and provable lies regarding the economy. He keeps trying to tell us that Bidenomics is a good thing. Well, you've been out speaking to the people of Middle Tennessee, and you've got some thoughts on this based on what you've been hearing from Tennesseans. And so talk a little bit about their concerns.
Absolutely, Dan. I mean, it's just shocking that Joe Biden tries to take credit for some type of victory on the economy when he's caused so many economic problems for Americans, including people right here in Tennessee. I'll tell you this. I'm back on my economic development tour. I go around the state every summer talking to businesses, understanding what's the challenge ahead of you, what's making things difficult. Inflation is the number one problem right now. And under Joe Biden, we've seen inflation of 17%. Prices at the grocery store for our workers up 20%. And if you look at wages for people that work here in Tennessee and across the nation, after inflation, net of inflation, because inflation has outstripped wage increases, people are down 5%. That means their earning power, their purchasing power, is 5% less than it was before Joe Biden took office. So people are feeling pain all across the nation. Inflation driven by Joe Biden's war on the oil and gas industry here in America that's driven oil and gas prices through the roof. Energy is an input factor for almost everything, whether it's manufactured or if it has to be moved. You have to use energy to do that. And if you think about the policies, the regulations, everything else that makes it harder to do business, that's all inherently inflationary too. So I've heard a lot about that. I've heard a lot about the difficulties that people are having getting folks to come back to work, getting properly trained people to come back to, because let's face it, companies have been competing against the U.S. government with all of these benefits and handouts that the Biden administration has, encouraged and continued to pour into the economy. Look, the COVID pandemic is way behind us, and they continue to hold on to those types of subsidies and the continued benefits, quote unquote, that are making it harder for employers to get people to come back to work. So there are a number of challenges and problems, but I'll say this, Dan. I would much rather be in Tennessee running a business and much rather be an employee in Tennessee than many other states. When I talk to my colleagues across the country, we've got it better here than other parts of the nation.
They talk about, Senator, they talk about the inflation and how President Biden's stimulus packages, especially the last one, really did cause inflation to skyrocket. Now, inflation has been going back down as some of that stimulus begins to run out and some people do go back to work. But one of the things that I often say is, number one, we'll never be able to get that money back. I mean, it went up to 9.1%. And again, now it's coming back down, but it has nothing to do with what President Biden is doing. As I said, most economists will tell you that it's because that stimulus has run out. And so that is less cash infused into the economy. Do you think the average American, I believe the Tennesseans get it, but do you believe the average American understands that when Biden is out there saying that he fixed the economy and he fixed inflation, do you think the American people understand that that is a blatant lie, especially when you look at the fact that he's the dude that caused the inflation in the first place?
Well, I tell you, if you look at his record here, and I hope we'll do a good job of conveying that in the 2024 elections, Biden's taking credit for the fact that inflation is slowing down. He hasn't stopped it. He's just slowed the rate of growth. He will hold the record of the century, Dan. For a century, he's the president that's created the most inflation. If it were to go to zero today and not grow another bit, and he hasn't got it to that point. And you're exactly right. He's the one that precipitated the inflation. The Federal Reserve has also stepped in and raised rates. That slowed things down. People are going back to work, just as you said, because the stimulus is running out. But he's the one that caused all of this. And I think the American public is certainly wise enough to understand it. The question is, will the news media convey that accurately? And I think here in Tennessee, we're fortunate to have people like yourself that are smart enough and capable to convey that. But across the nation, and certainly on the mainstream media on TV, that's not the case.
Senator Bill Hagerty is joining us. And, talking about Joe Biden, there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to sort of brush off the president and his dishonesty. And, you know, what I find fascinating is that his lies are multifaceted. I mean, we're talking about the economy right now, Senator, but, you know, yesterday, and this is a very big deal, I highlighted for folks the fact that when he was in Maui, he told this fantastical, you know, farcical story of his own house fire, which was not much of a house fire at all, according to the people that were there, 15, 16 years ago, whatever it's been. And he's in Maui talking to people that have lost everything. And he's talking about a house fire that was relatively minor. The local firefighters there said that it was literally insignificant. And that story has been fact-checked many, many times. And he makes it seem like, you know, his wife and his Corvette and his cat and his classified documents all almost perished in this fire when it was nothing. And I guess, you know, for someone like me, I get a little cynical and almost at times despondent because I see what you touched on the media, so you triggered me, Senator, because they're not covering the story of the fact that Biden has been fact-checked on this story and many, many others many times. And this is the same media that accused Donald Trump of telling, you know, a million lies or whatever it was. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, the fact checkers and the Pinocchio counters have all seemed to go back under their rocks and behind the trees, waiting for another Republican, another conservative to be in office. I listen to that too. You think about this, Dan, a grease fire in the kitchen, he's comparing that to a fire that's taken. Look, there are over 1,000 people that haven't been accounted for out there. This is a terrible tragedy. And the environmentalists who have actually precipitated this, the way they've misprioritized the resources in Hawaii, you think about what's really caused this, and you've got Joe Biden out there, you know, saying things like this. It's not only is it sad, it's a sad statement about the media, but it's also sad that we've got a president in that sort of state that you know, is an embarrassment to all of us on so many occasions.
One of the things, going back to the economy and going back to, you know, more of a policy-driven conversation, we know that you've been right there on the front lines in the battle at the border. And one of the stories that I covered yesterday quite a bit was a story from, I think it was Fox News or whoever it was, but where now we have, you know, some parts of the border in Arizona, Tucson, that are wide open. And so once again, we have thousands of these illegals coming right into our country illegally. And, you know, you're talking about the media, they're not really reporting all of this. But, you know, the bottom line is right now, even though you have some folks that are saying, well, the problems on the border have been fixed, they really haven't, given the fact that there is now a new hole that's been blown wide open there on our southern border. Is there anything that you folks can do in the Senate to, you know, try and fix things? I mean, I feel like our hands are tied at this point.
Well, it's because the Democrats have control of the Senate that we've not been able to stop it. In fact, they've used the funding mechanism that only requires 51 votes. That's the Democrats plus Kamala Harris. She's been a reliable help in this regard to get them into a position to just jam this through. They've destroyed the border. That's all Joe Biden's fault. You know, we brought illegal crossings down to a trickle under President Trump. The Remain in Mexico policy was the strongest component of that. And nobody respects President Biden. The Mexican government certainly doesn't. They're letting people flood in here. Now the cartels control that border. But the Democrats in the Senate shoved through funding not for border protection, but to help support the processing of people at the border, to accelerate the processing, to try to take those numbers of folks, those embarrassing scenes under bridges, to try to reduce that. So the only thing they've been willing to fund is the accelerated processing of more illegals coming into this country. And our Border Patrol agents are completely overwhelmed. I've been down there multiple occasions. They cannot handle this. They're demoralized by this administration. I respect every man and woman that's down there trying to do that job, but they are having an enormous challenge. And with the lifting of Title 42, they really don't have any tools left. This is a national security crisis. You and I have discussed it before. Over 170 different nationalities have been apprehended coming across that border. We don't know who's coming into our country. Fentanyl is flooding into our state. Just yesterday, I was talking to someone who knew 3 children that had died from fentanyl overdoses in their county. It's a crisis of epic proportions. And the media, again, not meaning to trigger you, Dan, but the media, again, and the mainstream will not cover this.
I'm easily triggered these days, Senator. Last question. We have the Republican debate tonight. Donald Trump will be interviewed by Tucker Carlson. What are you looking for tonight in the debate? What are you looking for the former president to say, that he is mired in all of these investigations? And we have, Ron DeSantis is sliding in the polls. You've got Vivek Ramaswamy, who is going up in the polls. So the rest of these folks don't really know if they're going to make much of an impact. But, here we are on August 22nd. Do you have any thoughts on where we go moving forward with not only the debate, but Donald Trump and just the conservative cause?
I think the debate tonight should highlight the fact that there are actually policies that would work. Yep. I hope it'll be a strong contrast, and I think that everyone on that stage will demonstrate one clear fact, that each of them and any of them would be more qualified to serve as our president than the current incumbent in that office. I think that will come across loud and clear. The other thing is the fact that we have Donald Trump being persecuted, being as more things come out about the Biden family corruption, the more pressure the DOJ and other prosecutors put on Donald Trump. They're trying to deflect and change the story, and they're also going after their number one most serious contender, because Donald Trump in the polls right now could absolutely smash Joe Biden. So they are, again, I think it'll be obvious with President Trump's absence from the stage what's happening, and I think it'll be clear that our policies, conservative policies, are what have made America strong, and the policies of Joe Biden are weakening us by the day. That should come across clear tonight.
Senator Bill Hagerty, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.